New permitted development rights took effect 1st August 2020. I'm talking about Class A. This is Zane from AC Design Solution. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. Without further ado, let's get into Class A. So today we're talking about prior approval, new dwelling houses on top of a detached block of flats. What does this mean for the architect? What does it mean for the developer? How do the council assess this? And are there any relevant casework, appeal work, or anything that can determine this? Yes, there are, and we're going to go in through the limitations, what to look for, what to do when you're drawing, and from a developer's perspective as well. So when did Class A come out? Class A, the GDPO was updated on 25th June 2020. However, Class A took effect on 1st August 2020. Now, what does this mean for the developer? It means for the developer, they can now add 2 additional floors on a purpose-built detached block of flats. Now, these 2 new floors must be flats. They cannot be anything else. So for a developer, that's a major thing to allow for 2 additional floors. Now, what are the limitations? We'll go into further details of some limitations, but the main limitation that stands out straight away is the building has to be constructed from 1st July 1948 to 5th March 2018. Now, what does that mean, and how do we prove that it's been constructed within those time periods? There are a few ways you can go about this. One is a land registry, checking the title deeds to check when it was registered. 2, a Google search. 3, the planning register. You can look at building control documents, so forth and so on. However, this is not a stepping stone that is mandatory that the principal building has been there for X amount of period of time as well. So it's more so a give and take. You can work out how long that building is there. Now, if the building was converted under the GDPO Part 3 under Class M, N, O, P, PA and Q. Now, some use classes have been abolished, i.e. Class M. That's now Class E. So we'll go into detail of Class M. However, Class E will be another tutorial going into further detail. What does it mean and how does it apply? Now, Class M. Class M was retail into residential. It meant that you can convert up to 150 square meters of floor space to residential, leaving the shop in the front. So you could convert behind the shop, on top of the shop. However, it had to be a maximum of 150 square meters. As I said on the previous slide, this is now being abolished. It falls under Class E, and that came into effect in September the 1st, 2020. There are other uses as well, like for example, Class O, office to residential, Class P, storage or distribution to residential, Class PA and Class Q. Now, storage and distribution, and we're looking at light residential as well, that can be a tricky scenario now. For example, under the London plan, this storage or distribution or premises in light industrial may be within a strategic industrial location. So this is something that you'll need to check. Is it within a strategic industrial location? If it is, the chances of converting that is limited. Not saying that you cannot. However, you need to look at the London Plan 2021, look at your local planning policy. Is it within a strategic industrial location? If so, the reason for this type of scheme, or why are you not making 2 new floors or another floor for the sole purpose of being a distribution center or industrial use? So these are some challenges that we'll need to overcome as well. So now let's go back to Class A, new flats on detached block of flats. Now, what does block of flats mean? Well, on the 2015 order, it clarifies what this means. It is, I quote, a building which is divided horizontally and consists of separate and self-contained premises constructed for use for the purposes of a dwelling house, and any ancillary facilities constructed solely for use by occupiers of the building. Definition makes clear that these have to be separate, self-contained premises, i.e. that block of flat is self-contained, so i.e. they have different types of flats in there. It could be a 1-bedroom flat, a 2-bedroom flat. However, it is solely self-contained and it's not HMO. Now, the current building must be at least 3 stories in height. If it's 2 stories, this will also fail. And also the building will fail if you add on those 2 new stories and they exceed 30 meters in height. Now, as we talked about before, development is not permitted by Class A. For example, above ground is less than 3 stories in height. We spoke about the construction of the site. Was it built between 1st July 1948 and 5th March 2018? If yes, great. If no, again, it will fail. The additional stories that is going to be constructed, they have to be on the principal part of the building. Now, what is principal? It cannot be on another part of the land. It has to be on the exact detached block of flats. Now, is the floor to ceiling height of any additional stories more than 3 meters in height? If it is, again, this will fail. We need to keep it to the maximum of 3 meters in height. Again, if it's more than that, it's going to fail, i.e. the GDPO, when you're doing extensions, flat roofs are normally 3 meters, so they're keeping to the same type of rules. Pitch roofs are 4 meters, so forth and so on. If the 2 new floors, as we spoke about before, are not going to be dwelling houses, then again, these are going to fail. If you're going to use it for another type of use, then those are going to fail. Would the overall height exceed 7 meters, i.e. if the 2 new floors together with the roof makeup and the floor makeup exceed 7 meters, then again it will fail. This is excluding any existing plants. If the 2 new floors together combined exceed 30 meters in height with the existing building, then again this is something that will make it fail within Class A and it wouldn't be permitted. You'll then need to apply for a planning permission, which again is rigorous. However, the Class A now, you're still applying the similar sort of documents as a planning permission. It just wouldn't be open to such rigorous testings as a planning application. Now again, this is self-explanatory. It wouldn't fall under Class A if it was a site of special scientific interest within Article 2.3, a listed building, scheduled monument, or land within its curtilage, safety hazard, so forth and so on. These are self-explanatory, so we'll move on to the council assessment on this. Again, the council will assess it on a few vital elements, i.e. transport and highways. This is one, to see whether those 2 additional floors will have an overspill to highways, because there's more people within the building. You know, if you're going to put 2 new floors and each floor is 10 flats for argument's sake, those 2 new floors could be 20 flats, providing 20 times 2. You could have an occupancy of at least 40 people. Within 40 people, you may have, for argument's sake, 10 new cars. Or is it a car-free area? If it's not a car-free area, the London Plan 2021 promotes having no car. Then you'd have to look at the bicycle area, where they're going to store the bicycles, so forth and so on, bin storage, how will that be traveled to its destination, where will that be stored. These are overspills onto highways, so these need to be looked at. Again, we look at the air traffic and defence. Now this is in paragraph 104 of the National Planning Policy Framework 2019. It clearly states planning policies should sustain and recognise the importance of maintaining national network of general aviation airfields and their need to adapt to change over time. So again, they know that aviation has to adapt. Having a building that tall could affect their adaptation to bringing further runways, bringing bigger planes, so forth and so on. So the council do need to consult with air traffic to see whether that building's close by, and if it is there going to be an impact or overspill to them. That's one of the elements. Contamination and risk, again, this is another element that's vital as well. Is that building contaminated or the land contaminated? If it is, we need to submit a contamination report. and allow the council to provide us to do phase 2 as a part of a condition, pre-commencement condition. Now, paragraph B 15 of Schedule 2, Part 20 of the 2015 order requires all local planning policy to determine whether, as a result of the proposed development, the site will be contaminated land. We've just been into this as well. The next thing we need to look at is flood risk assessment in relation to this building, i.e., is there more rain runoffs? Well, yes, there will be, because we're putting on a new roof. Is that roof a pitch roof? Is it a flat roof? If it's a flat roof, what is the type of runoffs it will have? The London plan makes reference to such runoffs as well. What will be acceptable? This is something you'll need to look at as well. And for example, if the premises has a soakaway, is that soakaway enough to take the new runoffs off the roof? If it's not, what will we do to make sure it actually is not providing a bad situation? So again, will Thames Water be able to handle this? If not, is it in a flood zone area? Do we need attenuation tanks? So forth and so on. So a flood risk, if you need SUDs, then that's something that we'll need to go into as well, which will be in another tutorial as well. So these are some of the things that we need to think about as well. Now we go on to the external appearance of the building. National Planning Policy 2019 on paragraph 124, it makes clear reference to the creation of high quality buildings. Now, high quality buildings, what are they? They take into consideration good designs. That's one aspect. Sustainability of that development. Do they enhance the character and appearance of the area? If not, how can that be determined? Now, this is a prior approval, so do we need to follow the same type of materials? If we don't follow the same type of materials, what are the consequences of that? We'll go into some appeal case logs on using different materials. Did it make a positive impact or did it not make a positive impact on the building? Again, paragraph 127 of the National Policy Framework goes into, is it visually attracted, i.e. is it sympathetic to the local character? You know, if you've got a block of flats and you're just putting 2 new stories on top, i.e. that block may be just a rectangle or box, and putting 2 new floors on top of that can detract from its principal elevation. It could make it look bulky, the density, the mass, all of these things that we need to take in consideration. Now, again, this is something you need to think about at the time when you do design the building. Now, another point and aspect is the provision of adequate natural light. Prior to this, prior approval didn't follow the route of looking at space standards, looking at the London Plan 2021. Do they have, for example, a 2-bedroom flat? Do they meet the criteria? Have they got enough storage? Are those habitable rooms having natural lighting into there? If they're not, then sometimes they could have got passed. But on Class A, we have to follow the London Plan 2021 space standards and provide natural lighting, i.e. you need to show that you've got a daylight and sunlight report to say that yes, there's enough lighting in there. Are they dual aspect? If they're not dual aspect, they have enough lighting from the single aspect windows that they have. So i.e. there may be bigger windows. Now, if they are bigger windows, is that going to affect the external appearance of the building? These are things that you'll need to look at when designing the building. Again, the next point is impact on amenity of the existing building. For example, you need to look at the local plan of that specific council. Do they take a 45-degree plane? Do they take a 25-degree plane to show from the neighboring building's habitable room a 45-degree plane or 25-degree plane that it does not intersect with that, so forth and so on. So in that scenario, you may be stepping your building in, and that may have an impact on the external appearance of that building as well. For example, if you step in that building on one side only, does it detract from its character? And what can we do to reduce this? It may be a situation that you're breaching that plane and only one story will be adequate in that scenario. So these are things that we need to think about before submitting an application under Class A. Now, what documents do we need to submit? We spoke about the council assessment, so it's vital that we submit a transport report. Now, your transport report may go into construction logistic plans, it may go into parking assessment, parking stress, it could go into sweat path analysis, so forth and so on. These are some things that we need to think about. How will a car maneuver? Again, it may be a situation where it's overcrowded and the bins need to be at the back. If they need to be at the back and you've encumbered such a large amount of flats, you may need to now have Euro bins. Now, you'll need to look at local planning policy on Euro bins. If it's at the back, how far is at the back? If it's 20 meters to the back, now a truck will need to drive into there to take those Euro bins and make a turn and come back out again. Or if it's not hit its quota, then you may be okay with smaller bins. Now, what is the distance between those smaller bins, and can a truck go into your premises? If it can't, how will you overcome this? These are things that you'll need to think about on a transport and highways. We went into air traffic defense. Is it near airfield? If it is, we'll need to consult with them, so forth and so on. Is the land contaminated? We need to provide a desktop study to say that it may be contaminated, however, we're going to do X, Y, and Z on a condition, so forth and so on. Flood risk, we've been into it. Is the property within a flood zone area? If yes, how will you overcome over rain runoffs? Will the soakaway be enough? Do we need attenuation tanks? So forth and so on. External appearance, we'll go on to this on external appearance and the council appeal on external appearance. What is external appearance? You know, if you put on new different types of material, does it have an effect on the external appearance of the principal elevation of that building? I.e., does it detract from the look of the building? Are you putting in bigger windows? If so, how would they look with the building below? You know, is all this symmetry? Are you using UPVC rather than aluminium? Do they need to be timber like the previous building? These are things that we need to think about. Does the material intersect with the existing building? Are you using any balconies to give that amenity space? You know, are the flats receiving natural light into the habitable room? So the living room has adequate light, the bedrooms have adequate light, so forth and so on. Now, roof light is not going to be the best scenario in providing natural light. Yes, it's secondary light, but it's not the main source. So if you're only relying on a roof light, then again, this is something that's going to have a huge impact on your application under Class A. Are those windows that you're placing going to affect neighbors? If it is, what are you going to do? Are you going to have obscure windows? How much light is going to be coming in with obscure windows? So forth and so on. Further documents are as standard. Floor plans need to be submitted, elevation. You have to take in consideration Space Standards London Plan 2021. Now, Class A is a prior approval application which will be determined within 8 weeks or 56 days. You can find more on Class A under Article 3.1, Schedule 2, Part 20 of the Class A, Town and Country Planning, 2015 as amended. You can look further into details of what we just gone through and see if there's anything that you want to target and ask more questions on that. I'm free to answer those questions in more detail. Now let's go on to appeal casework. Appeal caseworks are binding, so it'd be very good to research these appeals that are put on there, see why they were allowed, see why they were dismissed, and the reason for it. For example, the first case, it was allowed council, it was less about external appearance on this case and the building per se. So it was really and truly about the bulk of and massing of that building. Now, the council argument that the building will be dominant and intrusive feature in the street scene. For example, the buildings in that street scene were only 2-story family houses with pitched roofs. However, this building had 2 extra floors and it was over dominant, so when you drove onto the road, that building would be seen from every angle. Now, in this situation, The appeal was allowed, and the government objects to build a supply and demand of these houses. Hence the reason this appeal was allowed, and the framework was more so to do with external appearance rather than the bulk and density of that building. So the planning inspectorate on this scenario allowed the application to go through. Again, on the second application, it was allowed. Now, this application was to do with the external appearance of the building and would it be acceptable. What happened in this scenario is the developer actually chose to use different materials, and now were those materials suitable for this building? This building was a brick building. The developer used zinc type materials on the new 2 stories. Now, the planning inspectorate found that yes, I understand that they're going to be new materials. However, those new materials actually brought merit to that building. The building wasn't great to look at. Those type of materials enhanced the look and the principal elevation and made the building stand out. Again, the council argued that it is blocking the neighbouring building's natural light, so forth and so on. Now, what the architect did is they went through the local planning policies and looked at, is there 45-degree plane or 25-degree plane? Exactly what we went through before. They drew a 45-degree plane which would be uninterrupted from the neighbours' habitable windows, and it showed that these 2 new floors will not intersect with a 45-degree plane, hence the reason there's no blocking of light. Planning inspectorate picked that up and said, yes, I do agree with you, and the materials do actually bring merit to the building, and in this situation the external appearance is not affected, is rather enhanced, and that's the reason why we're accepting this appeal. However, the third appeal was dismissed. It had similar sort of scenarios, i.e. the character and appearance. However, the planning inspectorate found this to be a negative impact on the character and appearance of the building. On this scenario, they took into consideration paragraph 130 and 134 of the National Policy Framework. Now, the proposal would not be visually attractive in this scenario. So, it does not represent an outstanding or innovative design as per the National Policy Framework. We went into detail. When designing this, it's always good to make sure that when you model this, windows are in the correct places, they're lining up with the building. Is there any step back? If there is, does that distract from the principal elevation? If it doesn't, step backs they're great because they actually they actually make the building have more merit, something to look at. Whereas if it was straight up, it just looked like a block. So it's good to have step backs. However, step backs can create in a situation where you're overlooking, or you have a balcony effect and you're using that balcony in an area where there's no balconies, and that can cause an impact. So again, there's pros and cons to your design, so it's very vital you look at your design and see where you can go wrong. Now, in this scenario as well, this appeal also had a negative impact on the living condition of occupiers of the property with regard to outlook, like we've been through. The properties as well, the flats downstairs had roof lights on them. Now, they also had windows, correct? But these roof lights were secondary, they were producing more light. Now, when they put the 2 new stories on top of that, it actually affected the light going into those buildings. So, the planning inspectorate again refused it on the situation that it'll have a poor outlook on your flats downstairs and neighbouring properties. So again, this was refused, and so forth and so on. And you need to look at the National Policy Framework, look at paragraph 120 as well, D to E respectively, to promote the development, and it enhances to utilise land and buildings and support opportunities. However, again, we've been through this, even though the government is supporting to build, it doesn't mean we can still get what we want under Class A. We need to abide by the rules and see if we're going to cause any harm to any buildings, Are we going to cause any harm to the principal elevation? Is it going to be bulk, density, and mass? If it's going to be a lot of mass, how will we overcome this? Are we going to have any step backs? You know, is there going to be any dog legs in this situation? Are we creating any balconies? The use of glass could be a situation which you want to use as well to make it less, you know, less bulky, more to look at, so forth and so on. However, if you do use glass, is that could have a bad impact, a negative impact on the people or future occupiers of those flats. Again, how will you overcome that? If you're going to have windows, are they going to be obscure so it's not looking to anyone else? So forth and so on. These are things that we do need to take in consideration when designing. So it's paramount you look at the National Policy Framework, the London Plan 2021, and also look at these appeals in more detail in your own time when you have that time. If you don't, you can always ask me questions and I can answer them for you, go into more detail of why they were refused, or are there any more appeals to say yes, external appearances won't affect it. If your building is very similar to this building, so you can research these buildings. Is your building very similar to this? What did the developer do to allow this, get this appeal allowed? What did the developer fail on when it went to appeal? Is there anything you can take from these appeals to actually benefit you and enhance your design? I highly recommend you look at these as well. And also look at the legislation in further details. Thank you very much for watching my video. If you like this video, please like and subscribe for more content. Thank you very much.